you're always torn a little bit, right? And you want to you write books that sell, and there's
Yes.
always those books that you want to write that you don't think will sell very well, and you almost have to like it's like the Nicolas Cage school of acting, right? You do the film that is really good, but it doesn't sell very well, and then you do a national treasure, right, to pay for the other one. That's kind of what you have to do sometimes.
The group pressed forward, the forest starting to thin. They found themselves at the edge of the tree line, looking up at a colossal set of stone doors, big enough to allow a giant to stride through. You could back away now. There's no way this ends well for you. You're outnumbered and outclassed. There's no shame in it. Outnumbered, maybe, but outclassed, Jackson said. If you're trying to warn us away, then there has to be something good in there. Tracy Gregory, how's Wales?
Warm at the moment, too warm. Honestly, I'm not used to it.
Yeah, it's not good here. It's the Brits. We don't cope well with heat. We're not set up for it. We don't
No.
have the air conditioning like Americans have. We just grin and bear it, and we just get on with it, and just get all just really sweaty. Yeah. Does that make writing difficult? The hot weather?
Can do. Yeah, yeah. Because like I said, British houses were not. They were never designed for heat, were they? They're built to keep heat in,
They
not
are. Yeah.
get rid of it. And so yeah, it can get a bit warm and a bit difficult. Yeah.
Have you been writing today?
Not today. No, I've been kind of busy with other things, but yeah, kind of running around a lot today. If I'm honest.
What, personal stuff or stuff to
Yeah,
do with the busy
just
life
personal
of
stuff.
a professional author?
Just personal stuff that needs to be done.
Do you find it hard to find, because an author's lifestyle, your home is also your workplace. Do you find it hard to balance the two things? Because they kind of can get intertwined, can't they?
Not normally. I try and separate things out as if I was doing like a normal work day.
Yeah.
But I think inevitably something's going to creep in here and there that you've got to end up doing. Yeah, yeah. It's just human nature, I think that is.
And do you structure it like a 5-day week with weekends off?
Yeah, I try to, yeah.
You do? Yeah, I've got to get better than that at that. Because, since I've been a narrator, I've basically taken on the lifestyle that an author
Yeah.
lives. And I find it tricky to not work, because I've always got a lot of books on the go. And it's like, it might be a Sunday afternoon and I'm like, I might just go in and get a couple of hours done. And I find, at the moment it's tricky because my wife, she injured her shoulder. And so she's off work a lot. She's working a lot less. And so she's home. So it feels like the weekend but I've got to work but she's here. It is tricky. So
It can be.
you don't have those distractions?
I do occasionally, but I try and separate it out as best I can. I think if you start letting things creep into like evenings and weekends, then you just end up working all the time constantly. And that's sounds like a recipe you just crash out eventually, right?
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. But it's for me, you're actually working. You are creating something from nothing. I am taking your words and interpreting them. So I'm not really working. I'm spending a lot of time, but there isn't that much actual work because at the end of the day, I'm not creating anything from scratch. All the work's done when I come to it. Yeah.
I don't actually think that's necessarily true. I mean, even if you've got the book as a script, I think it's still a lot of work a narrator has to do, right? You have to an extent, the way that you portray these characters is sometimes different from the way that authors originally intended them, or it's bringing a character to life is difficult, right? And then you have to do all the editing and everything on top of that, Like, so I don't think you don't do it. Nothing. I think it's harder work than people suspect. I think.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't find it that hard. Because I'm incredibly organized. I have for every character,
Yeah.
and your books have a lot of outrageous characters because they're fantasy books, and so the characters are not based. They are based on real people, and I use references of real people. Like, for instance, Snark in this series, who is my favorite in this series. He is like a lot of people I've met a lot of negative people I've met who tend to be unintentionally funny. But the thing is, with a lot of variety of characters, I always have a file for each book, an audio file, where I have a reference point of when that character first appeared, so I can go back to that to listen to them for consistency. So the work would be a lot harder if a character came up and I had to scroll back to different chapters to find where they. But I know I can just go to, they're alphabetical, and I can go and find Snark and go, oh yeah, Snark sounds like that. So yeah, I think being organized for me is the key to getting it right. What about for you? Because
oh no, I'm awful. I'll I'll have a character, and then when I bring him back, I'm like, I can't remember what this character was like, and I'll have to like go back and like Control F and find them in a previous chapter, and then reread them and be like, oh right, yeah, I do it all the time.
Okay, really?
Yeah.
Oh well,
yeah.
maybe you need to do what I do. You maybe need to have a little, maybe the first paragraph they said that defines their character, and you can go back. And I do it with audio. I have usually the first. I mean, often the first thing they say is like, hey, you, or something, or we're going to leave that alone. So I have to wait till I find like a nice bit of content that the character said in that voice, and I keep that as the reference point for that character. Because with you, we've done multiple books in a series, and so there's characters that can come back from previous books quite often. And so I have to be very careful with yours. But yours are so much fun. You write characters so well. Where do you get the ideas for characters from?
I don't know. Whenever I'm setting a scene or like a thing is happening in the book, in the plot or whatever, and I need to bring in a character here, I always kind of think what would be the most interesting character in that situation.
Yeah.
That tends to be how I approach it.
Yeah.
Right? And then what happens often is I'll end up with characters who go, oh, what would be interesting to happen here? What kind of person would be interested in this situation? And then if I need a similar character later on, I'll go back and I'll grab a character from like an earlier book or previous book and then bring them back in and flesh that out more. So sometimes I'll just create characters just as like little seeds so I can go back and be like, okay, well, this person would be interesting. So if I bring them in, and kind of loop them back and build on them a bit, and kind of, I think it's more satisfying for readers as well to see like little characters who just get like a brief side mention or they're like a one-off merchant or something become more important later on.
Yes.
Because it feels like they're rewarded more for keeping up with the books and keeping up with the characters and paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So I just tend to be like, well, if I need a new character, who would be the most interesting here? Or is there an existing character I can plug in that would be really interesting? And how do I get that from A to B? Yeah.
And what tends to happen in your books is you end up with like a core team that are sharing an adventure. Do you set out with those as the core characters, or do they kind of find each other along the way and end up being recruited into the core team?
It tends to be the case of I'll have an idea of, the lead character, the main character. Yeah. If they do end up with like a team or a group around them, it's just the characters I find I have the most fun writing the interactions between them.
Yes.
I
the dialogue between them is superb.
Yeah, I tend to think in these kind of situations, there's often a lot of like, high stakes or life and death and that kind of thing. I tend to think it would be the people that they would maybe get along with anyway would become their core. So these two characters are having they spark off each other particularly well. They'll tend to stick around and become part of the core group. So I think that's kind of how it works in real life as well, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and they gently rib each other. I mean, before I got into radio, which isn't a real job at all, I had real jobs. And I worked as a pipe fitter on a construction site for 3 years. And the ribbing between people in a closed team. I mean, this was a construction site. There was like 2,000 of us on the job at any one time. But you only worked in your gang. And so there'd only be like 8 or 10 of you. And, you get a rainy day when you're all cabined up because you can't work because the weather's bad or something. And that's really when you find out who everybody is. And, and you seem to reflect that in the characters in the little teams you build when they're faced with challenges and somebody maybe says something out of line or there's somebody who they have to put up with.
Yeah.
And you've got all that going on. Does that relate back to an actual job you had before you were a full-time author to find those relationships?
I think all jobs are like that to an extent, right?
Yeah,
You always end up, if you have to work in a little group or a little team, you always
yeah,
end up with people that maybe you become friends with outside of work, or maybe you're a bit
yeah,
shyer with, or there's people you have to put up with because
yeah,
they got a useful skill, or they know something about like a system or a process that you don't. And then these kind of like fantasies. There's a reason I think in like fantasy fiction, the idea that there's like a party of adventurers is so common,
yeah,
because in a lot of these settings, they are jobs
yeah.
almost,
They have a
right?
goal, yeah, and a
It
common
is they're
shared
like,
interest, common enemies.
yeah, when they're tasked with, oh, you need to go, and it's obviously in this series they're generally tasked, oh, if you're new to the town, you have to go do some kind of quest to earn your place, right? And
Yes,
that is a job, right? Go
yeah,
and deal
yeah,
with this monster or this dangerous thing, or find whatever item. That is work. So I kind of do pattern it off that where they would be colleagues and maybe friends, and these certain situations, they're dangerous. They generally tend to form bonds anyway, right? People who go through that kind of thing just
yeah.
become close because you have to survive, right? A lot of the time.
I think that's the thing that surprised me most about narrating your books, because fantasy books, until I narrated one of yours, I didn't really. You think it's fantasy. It's a world. It's an extreme world. It's not this world. The characters are different beings and what have you. But the dialogue between them and the way that they operate is so relatable to the life we have,
Mm-hmm.
and you've tapped into so many universals, and it makes them very, very real as people, regardless of whether they're human or not. That is quite the skill, that you've managed to make them so ordinary in so many ways, even though they are extraordinary beings in lots of other ways. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that us reading the fantasy, they're only extraordinary to us, right? To
Yes.
themselves, they're perfectly normal.
In their
I think
world,
that's
yeah.
the thing. Yeah, you have to. Fantasy is just off on its own, and it's completely out there, and there's nothing really that grounds it to reality. I think it's
Yeah.
difficult to get invested in that,
Yeah.
right? Because then it's a fairy tale, right?
Yes. Yes.
It has to have some element of being grounded in reality. Otherwise, there's nothing really to hold on to. Even when
Yeah.
you've got all the strange, wild stuff, it's the stuff in between that's normal, which I think makes it
It's
relatable to
relatable.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, this is book 2 in the Eternal Dungeon series. And you've got, the same main character again, Jackson.
Mhm.
Tell me about this book, where the idea came from for an ever expanding world, which is in effect a dungeon where people are placed, and their ultimate goal, like the Wizard of Oz, is to get home. Where did this idea come from then?
The idea was always, you see this in a lot of fantasy fiction. People go into a big dungeon or whatever it may be. Something's trapped inside. And the idea is the dungeon is just so large as to be functionally infinite. Like how do people survive in that kind of scenario? Was the idea.
Hmm.
Like, do they just go in and then eventually they're bumped off by some monster or a trap or something, or do they find a way to eke out like little pockets of civilization, little kind of attempts at normalcy in this just completely bizarre situation? I always like the idea of how different people would approach that, and kind of how it would logically kind of spin out from there. Things
Yeah.
like the town of Haven is just people who have gathered enough scrap and materials to try and at least pretend like they've got some kind of normal ish life, right? But it's not really, is it? Because they're only kind of, I think it's part of the kind of underlying themes of like the book and stuff, is that it's not, they think they've maybe scraped together a little normal life there, but it's almost been provided to them. Oh yeah, there just so happens to be a chamber big enough that they can build these buildings. There just so happens to be the chambers nearby that are full of fields and farmland that they can use, right? It's almost
Yeah.
like that there's some kind of guiding hand, maybe some kind of
Yeah.
intent behind the dungeon that's not inherently clear.
Yeah.
And I think the kind of ending parts of this book touch on that a bit
Yes.
more, I think. Yeah.
And how do you think this series is different to previous game lit and lit RPG fiction that you've done?
The previous stuff I tend to do tends to be, I try and keep it more kind of family friendly.
Yeah, this
Kind of
one's
all those.
sweary. We
This one,
should
yeah,
point that one out.
this one was the one where I thought I'm just gonna take any kind of limit off and just do
Yeah,
something that's a bit more out there, a bit more suitable for the parents only, and just have a bit of fun with it, a bit of something that was a bit different to what I was already writing,
yeah.
and kind of just explore those kind of ideas and things. Yeah.
And how does it compare sales-wise with the other books, which are a bit more all-inclusive because they're not as the dialogue isn't as grown up?
I think the all inclusive ones do better.
Okay.
This one does okay. It does
Yeah.
okay, but the all-inclusive ones do better. But I have a lot of fun writing all my books. But I do have a particular amount of fun writing these ones because it is a bit more
Well,
just whatever
I don't
fun
think
I do.
Snark would work if he wasn't so sweary.
No,
Because it's just who
no,
he
it wouldn't.
is.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not been like the language has been bolted onto the character. It's a part and parcel of the character. You know what I mean? Particularly him. But
Yeah.
other, when Jackson gets frustrated, it works a treat as well. To get the emotions across of the frustration and the anger and whatever it turns out to be. It makes it even more relatable, I think. What are the underlying themes then that you'd like listeners or readers to grapple with in this one?
I think the kind of the main theme of this entire series is the idea of people being put, how much control you have over your own life, how much kind of your circumstances maybe define who you are more than you think they do, and how do you try and break out of that, or do you even want to break out of that? Like Jackson is thrown into a dungeon against his will; he has no control over that. He has become this almost sort of not hero, but at least someone willing to put himself at risk. But that's because he's got an ability that mitigates that for him,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
again, is that something of his own choosing, or was that the design of the dungeon when it gave him that ability? Was that the intent
Yes,
to begin
because
with?
he is like a reluctant leader, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah. And again, there's, without getting too much into spoilers, there's a big part near the end of this book where kind of a character changes jobs almost.
Are you talking about the challenge you gave me where characters switch voices? I mean, we don't want to
A
give too
little
much
bit,
away.
yeah.
Yeah. That was really intricate, the way that you'd written that. It was very, very smart.
Yeah, it's because for her entire job has been to do one thing
Yes.
and to control a lot of things,
And
even though she's
to
not fully.
appear to be neutral as well.
Yeah, and then very suddenly she's not.
Yes.
Right, and again, that kind of upends was how does that impact her control of her life, which maybe she kind of didn't have before
Yeah.
and does now, and kind of where does that lead, and kind of how they fit into this, what is seems like a random place but ultimately has some kind of logic behind it, some kind of ecosystem
Yeah.
there that it's almost like designed, right? And it's about that kind of conflict between kind of nature and nurture almost, right? It's how do you cope if reality was fully designed in one way? What does that mean for you as a person? It's kind of like the main thrust of the books, I think.
The way you've got these characters to switch. I'm trying not to give too much away, but there are two characters and their voices switch, but the characters are the same, but with the voice of the character they switched with. So
Yeah.
the challenge for me was to still sound and say, well, you've written the words that were the words that fit the character, but to say them in another character's voice, but still let you know that which character was speaking. And I actually really enjoyed the way that was played out, because the roles became very different as well. And it challenged them to think who they are and what they're about and why they're there and what their basically their morals and their motivations really are. It's very, 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 very smart, very smartly written, and thank you so much for doing it that way. It was a lot of fun. We might not be making a lot of sense to someone who hasn't experienced the books yet, but if you want to find out, then check out Descent and check out the first book in the Eternal Dungeon series, because there's only 2 at this stage.
Yeah.
With things like Goblin Summoner, I can't remember how many we've done now. Is it about?
We're working on book 8 at the moment.
Will this series go as long as that? Do you think? Is that
No, I kind of had in my
okay.
head that this would be like a trilogy. It would be kind of quite a relatively succinct thing. A trilogy is still quite a lot of books.
Yeah, so similar
a bit
to
more
Star Commander.
self-contained. Sorry.
Similar kind of
Yeah.
length to real-time
Well,
Star
that ended
Commander.
up as 4, didn't it? But yes, a
It
similar
did, yeah.
kind of complete package. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Now, this one does have something in common with all of your other books. The covers are spectacular. Where does that come from? How does that happen? They are spectacular.
This particular one was done by an artist friend of mine,
Yeah,
as well as the first Eternal Dungeon one. She put both of them together
yeah,
for me and kind of put those things. Kind of the Goblin Summoner ones are part of a package of art that was done for me back in the first book.
yeah,
That's why they're all kind of very similar.
yeah,
But this one was done by a different artist to those, and she did both covers, and he did an amazing job on both covers.
yeah. And is she in Wales as well?
No, she's somewhere in America.
Oh, really? This is an international collaboration.
Yeah, it tends to be the case. What you'll find will happen is a lot of authors share the same kind of online social circles. It's the same Facebook groups, the same Discord servers, the same kind of Reddit pages, right? Same Twitter feeds. They all kind of link into each other, and we all kind of know each other. You know the same artists, you know some of the same narrators to an extent, because they get used by different authors, and they'll be like, oh yeah, use this person, do this
Yeah,
art, or I can send you this link. So you tend to find, especially within lit RPG, where it's a smaller genre, and obviously then that means that the authors tend to know each other a lot more than they might do in like a much bigger genre
right.
worldwide. So it's fairly normal. You tend to know most of the other people writing in a genre like this, because it is kind of so small, and you read all each other's books and things like that as well, and you bounce ideas off each other. I think that's a fairly normal thing, I think, nowadays for authors.
Yes, yeah. I find that musicians often talk about being influenced by other musicians often,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they'll reference musicians. You might really like someone, and they'll reference musicians you've never heard of, and then you listen to the influence and you go, that doesn't sound anything like them, but they got something from it and they put their own thing into it, and that's how the creative process works. You hear it with actors often talk about that. They steal things from different actors and little things, techniques they use and whatever. I worked for a long time in radio, and you virtually never heard that in radio, which probably proves that radio is not actually an art. Whereas writing, creating, being a musician or an actor, that is proper art. But
there's that old saying, all artists steal, and the idea is every artist, to get better at any art, especially writing, the best way to do that is to consume other pieces of art, right?
yeah.
To get better at writing, read as many books as you possibly can.
Well, on this, because I work with so many authors and I talk to so many authors when we do these YouTubes, I've yet to find an author who was not a big reader first.
Well, yeah,
That's it.
Right?
You have to be, yeah, because that's where all the motivation comes from. The difference that I've found as well between successful authors like yourself and authors who are good but don't seem to have the same kind of success is basically in the marketing of the book, especially these days where people work as indies rather than with big publishing companies. Yeah. Do you have any creative ideas for marketing that you use that you're willing to share, that other authors watching this who have got, they've got a few books out, but they're not quite getting the success that maybe they deserve?
The only real... I've tried a lot of marketing things, in my time doing this. And a lot of authors do. You always go through a phase where you do like Facebook ads and Amazon ads and things like that. But ultimately, the only thing that really works is having readers, and the only way to have readers is to put out books, and it's a slow process. You know, I put out a lot of books before I got to where I am now, but the only like people read books generally because their friends tell them to read them,
Right.
right? It's like
So it's
TV.
a
It's like
personal recommendation from someone you
yeah,
trust.
yeah, and the only way to do that it's kind of a cyclical problem where the only way to do that is to have people who read your books already. If no one reads your books, no one can recommend your books. But it is the case of you just got to keep putting books out. You just got to keep at it. Every book you put out, if you sell 10 copies and that's it, but, two of the people who read that really loved your book and they buy the next ones. And the next one you sell 12 copies because they've told their friends to buy them. And then the next one is 20. And then the next one is 30. That's the only real way I found to get success is to just, it's the hard graft. It's the same as just imagine YouTube videos, right? You don't put out one YouTube video and suddenly right success, right?
Yeah,
You've
yeah.
got to build up a small audience, and that then snowballs into a bigger audience and a bigger audience and a bigger audience. Especially because things like Amazon, where Amazon is the main marketplace for books, right?
Right.
It is. It's like 90% of books. That is all algorithmically driven in exactly the same way YouTube is. You
Yeah.
probably see the emails you get off Amazon being like, oh, these books have been released this month. You might like these. You do your search and it comes up on the feed. These are books you might like. It's all the same kind of logic, right? And you have to have little amounts of success
Yes.
that then snowball into bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger amounts of success.
Right. So the answer is to just write, because there's somebody I know who claims they are a writer, and they've written one book, and you can't buy it because they're still waiting for a publisher to pick it up.
No.
That they're not a writer, are they? A writer is someone who writes.
I think that's the difference between a writer and an author. They're a writer because they've written.
Yeah.
But they're not an author. Author implies you're doing it on some kind of professional level.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And yeah, if you're waiting, like obviously people get picked up by publishers, and publishers can help you do things. It's a lot of work to publish independently. If you're with the publisher, they will sort out your cover, sort out the editing, sort out some of the marketing, but probably not. You probably still have to do that yourself. So they do take some kind of weight off your shoulders, but you obviously pay for that, right? They take a cut. They take a percentage.
So you are
for
paying,
some people that's the right choice. But for me personally, a lot of what you see from it's not really the case in the lit RPG publishers. There's a couple of publishers in lit RPG, and they're all very small. They all tend to be owned by authors themselves, and they'll pick up like upcoming novels from like various websites where people post their novels in like serialized formats and that kind of thing. Again, to gain a fan base.
Yeah.
But like bigger publishers, the ones that go into like your Waterstones and that kind of thing, they're always looking for something that's going to be like the next Harry Potter, the next massive thing. And anything that's not that
really big, right? Yeah.
Yeah, anything that's not that doesn't really get a huge amount of support, and it's always quite. You're bound to see like in your papers and stuff, debut author goes to #1 and stuff like that, and that's never true. If you look into it, it's never their first book. Maybe their first book from that publisher.
Yes.
But it never is. No one writes their first book and then turns to a publisher and the publisher goes, oh, yeah, we'll take 20 million copies, thanks.
Yeah.
Right? That's just not how the world works and not how, art works. You never knock it out of the park on the first try. Every author that publishes a book has got 100 on their hard drive that they started writing when they were 13 and would never think to put out into the world from sheer embarrassment, right?
Right.
So I definitely think that the world of publishing is changing. Independent is going to become more and more and more of a thing.
Yeah.
In the same way that more and more of like online video entertainment is like on YouTube and things like that.
Yeah, I can sit and watch YouTube for hours because it only shows me videos that it thinks I'll like.
It's not even that, but there's people like putting things out on YouTube that are like full-length, interesting documentaries.
Yeah.
That 15 years ago, they would have had to have pitched to BBC Two, and BBC Two probably would have said no, and you would never have seen it.
And it takes 2 years to get greenlit,
Yeah.
They can just get on with it.
I don't know if you've seen them, but there's one guy on YouTube who has had fairly recent, like quite good success, and he does really short documentaries, but they're on like really mundane things, like why does a Tesco's have a clock tower? Like,
I've
why
seen
did
that one.
Marathon change its name to Snippets?
I've seen that one too. I've seen his. Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, but they would never get commissioned on TV,
Not a
right?
chance, no. But they're
But they're
great.
brilliant.
They are
They're
brilliant.
really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think, and more entertainment things are going to become like that. Right?
Yeah.
There's more, like, people put out movies, they put out games, they put out all kinds of things that would have had to have gone through a publisher in the past.
Yeah.
And now it's just free for anybody to do it. And a lot of it is rubbish. Some of it is very, very good.
Yeah.
And I think, I think the good stuff will always rise to the surface because people will recommend it.
Yeah.
Someone will find that diamond in the rough and then they'll tell everyone, right?
And you with the lit LPG, sorry, I've done that again, haven't I? I keep going LPG, which is liquid petroleum gas. it's the lit RPG, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which stands for?
It stands for role playing game. That's because generally these books are they're very similar to a lot of people might be more familiar. There's a genre of Japanese TV show called isekai, and that basically means like another world. Literally the translation, and they've been doing this kind of trapped in another world, and maybe there are like video game-esque rules that apply to it for a long time, since like the 70s. Lit RPG is the like Western term for it.
Okay.
And that was kind of the Western side of that kind of subgenre. Initially came from like Russia. A lot of the first lit RPGs are Russian, and they named it. And that's just carried over then into like the English-speaking world.
Right. Okay. But it is similar to games with cards and stuff, and Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And again, people have been again a great example. One, like, nowadays you get your Critical Role and stuff like that, where people play Dungeons and Dragons, people watch it on YouTube.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest selling fantasy series of all time in Japan is what's called Record of Lodoss War. It's been around, like I said, since the early 70s. It's got its own books, video games, movies, TV, and that started off as players of a Dungeons and Dragons game writing their Dungeons and Dragons game as if it were a piece of fiction, and publishing it in what was then like I think it was like a car magazine or something. It wasn't even like a games magazine.
Oh, was it a comic strip kind of a thing?
No, like written. It was
written. Okay.
It was just in the magazine as like an article, and it would come out.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah.
But it would be written as though it were a novel.
Yeah.
But it was the things that happened in their game.
Yeah.
And it would reference, elements of the game, like, I found this particular sword with this particular stats. And it was so popular.
Right.
That it started like an entire, like over in Japan, people don't play Dungeons and Dragons. They play a game called Sword World, which is the Record of Lodoss War, like official role-playing game.
Wow.
Because it was that popular. But it's the same genre now, what we call lit RPG. It's the same thing.
Right.
And even the like very basics of the idea, like Mark Twain wrote a book where a Southern gentleman goes back to King Arthur's court, doesn't he? And he's essentially in a different world and has to use all his skills and his knowledge. And that's minus the numbers. That's the same thing as now. It's the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah,
right?
but that's what's happening to Jackson, definitely, in these books. Yes, it's definitely what's happening there.
Yeah, I think it's a long-standing trope, and it's just the modern form of that, I think.
But it works so well because you've got that. He's like our representative in the world, so he's seeing things through our eyes. Because to some people in those worlds, what's happening isn't that unusual, particularly if there's magic involved.
Yeah, exactly.
So to have that, it's a very clever device. Device being uncruel, it's art. So it's not like a device, like an engineering device. It is just a great way of telling the story, and having his reactions to what he's faced with and the challenges he has to get around, and a lot of the time using logic from our world that bamboozles the people in the world because they've not seen or even thought of things that way. And you've got lots of little references to that when in this and in Goblin Summoner. you know, when he talks about something and other characters go, "I've no idea what you're talking about there."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they are just great books. This is it's The Eternal Dungeon. It's book 2. It's called Descent. It's another wonderful book from Tracy Gregory. If you'd like to get the audiobook, check the description, and there'll be links there to Amazon for you to go there and to download it. Hey, Tracy Gregory, continued success.
Thank you, Graham.